My name is Paul Asnikar, and if you look here, even though today's focus is on the on-center application, there's some Alliance Solution Group currently today has 3 locations. We're in California, we're in Texas, and also in Florida. Some of the other locations that we serve or service, if you notice down there, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Caribbean Islands. And Alliance Solution Group is a partner for not only the on-center application, you can see some of the other applications up there. We resell Sage 300, which was formerly Timberline Accounting. The Sage 100, which was formerly Master Builder. And then we have the Sage Estimating, which was formerly Timberline Estimating. And then you see some of the HR applications, and then some of the 2D applications we support, On-Screen Takeoff today, PlanSwift. We support some BIM solutions that we pull from Revit drawings, applications also such as D-Profiler. So currently today, Alliance serves we have over 4,000 customers in those locations. So a little quick introduction about our company. Again, my name is Paul Asnikar. Today's focus is On-Screen Takeoff. And kind of what I'm doing today is I kind of want to break this into kind of 3 parts. The first part is kind of giving you the basics of the on-center application, how it works, how we can drop in a set of plans, being able to set some scales and do some basic takeoff. And then after we kind of have a handle on that, we move into some of the more advanced topics such as overlays and being able to do some things, such as being able to establish hot links, being able to reference a detailed sheet while you're on the plan, and being able to build some style sets and your libraries and that sort of thing. And so that's kind of the advanced topic. And then the third piece I'll finish with is being able to show you how this takeoff can feed the Sage Timberline spreadsheet, and kind of as a segue for our next week's webinar. So if I come, and the goal, if I come back to this here, if you look here, the reason I've kind of broken this into chunks is that a lot of it is kind of how I implement on-screen takeoff. The nice thing about on-screen takeoff, it literally is, once you do the install, you're downloading a set of PDF drawings as an example, and then, once you set some scales and start working with it, you can use it kind of out of the box. And the second phase of that, which is what I'm calling the advanced topics, is kind of the next move on the implementation. People will realize what they have, and they can start getting into working with building a library of conditions, the style sets, and some of these other advanced features. And then kind of the third phase of this implementation is if you're interested in connecting it up with the Sage Timberline Estimating and being able to connect that Timberline database with those conditions and drive that cost estimate off of your takeoff. So it's kind of why I'm flowing that way with my PowerPoint. So jumping right into this, and what I'm going to try to do is get the presentation done in about 40 minutes, and then leave the last 10, 15 minutes for some open discussion, communication, and maybe addressing some questions. So as I roll into here, essentially what on-screen takeoff is, think of it as this is the dashboard. And as I give you the basics, really all we're doing is whether we receive a CD with the PDFs, whether they're located on the file server. Most folks take the information, whether they're downloading plans, from a server, a website, plan room type of deal, or a CD, and they're putting it out on the server so others can benefit from it. And so as I walk you through this application, the first step is to get those drawings somewhere located that you're going to find. And what you're seeing here is On-Center's dashboard of the list of projects you may be working with. And so all I physically and simply do is over here, I can build a new folder or bid, and I can organize my projects. And that's one of the things I'm going to talk about here a little bit later is is one thing I really like about OnCenter is it's a database-driven application. So as you have plans out on the server located, you might have multiple people that may want to use this. They may want to reference similar projects. It is a database, and if you look here, if I go open, this would be where I would be able to point to a database, and every user could be able to do that, pointing to the same location. What's nice about that is that you get into some of the larger customers that want to centralize the list of projects and information. You'll be able to see what each other's working on just by pointing to that same location or branch. The concept here is very simply, I can go in here, go right mouse key. I can do the same thing up here, file new bid, same concept. And when I do that, I've got the ability now to put in the project name. Project name typically would be the set of the name of the blueprints. So I might go over here and say this is, the Edwards project for OST webinar. And so this would be like the name of your blueprints. Down below here is where I'm pulling in those sheets. And if you notice here, I've got the ability to add images. I can also add single sheets. So if I click here, the whole concept is when I open that up, I would browse out to the CD or out to the server, and I would look for those files. And so in this case, if I do the drop-down files of type, you'll notice how many different file types it can read. And so when I open this up, this command I was touching on here, the second command to the right from the left, if I open this up and double-click, it just sweeps up and grabs all those files. And the intent with that is when I use the auto add, I can click here and it just grabs everything underneath that folder. If I click here, I've got the ability to come in and kind of pick and choose maybe individual sheets if I don't want all the plans. And so the whole concept is, hey, I've dropped the plans into my project, I hit OK, and then at that point it takes me right into the next screen. And what you're seeing here are these tabs. So if I go back to bid, there's my project that I just created. If I click on image, there's the image. And so as we're working with this, you'll notice the sheets are right here that I can drop down. I can browse and go through. Typically what you're going to get from the architect or engineer is something labeled like this, and it may not mean anything to you. So as I'm browsing through these sheets, every sheet that I'm in, I can simply come over here to the right on the big screen here and go right mouse key and say rename page, and I'm going to call that first floor plan. I'm not changing the actual file, the properties, but I'm just being able to rename that so I can see that information. And so now when I do the drop down, I know where I'm going. Now, what you're seeing here is kind of a three-pane view where obviously this is the sheet, and I can zoom in, I can zoom out, and as I zoom in here, this is my pan on the upper left that I can move around. Over here on the left is physically what I'm going to wind up quantifying, whether I'm going to take off carpet, walls, footings, whatever. This is nothing more than a sheet of paper that I'm going to build inside the program and then be able to do the takeoff. So once we get the drawings established, we're into the images, we rename some of the sheets that we want to work with. As we do that, we can also come down and set the scale. And if we set the scale, we've got the ability to come right here on this drop down and just simply choose the scale. Above and beyond that, we also have the ability, if you're dealing with CAD drawings, that information, stays really, what I've seen is that stays true to the drawings, and there really isn't any difference in terms of resolution and your scale being off. But you may have, with a PDF or a JPEG or a TIFF, there may be some resolution difference based on the way those things were scanned. So I always like coming in and zooming into the drawing and taking a look at a dimension, and I can just go over to Edit, Calculate Scale. And if you look here, there's that 10-foot dimension. As I put that in, I can come in here and go and pick that dimension. and it generates a scale for me based on that dimension. And as I do that, I can also say apply to all pages. I'm not going to do that. I got some details that have different scales anyway. So once the scale's been set, I can start doing some takeoff. And again, what I'm really doing at this point is saying, okay, maybe I want to take off some doors. And I can just hit plus here over on the lower left, and then creates a new condition. Again, nothing more than writing on a piece of paper. And if you see the drop down, the length area count, if I click on count, I could say maybe this is door type 1, whatever. And as I hit OK, it instantly starts putting that there over on the lower left sheet. And all I have to do now is come in here and just start choosing and selecting my doors. I can just click on plus again and say, you know, I'm going to take off wall, 2x4 walls or wall type 1, whatever. And as I hit OK here, I can come in and I can go and grab a segment. Maybe that wall type is from here to here. I can also do the ability to connect lines. If I choose over here on the trace mode, I can actually come over and say, hey, I really want to get that wall, and all I'm doing is just picking points, and it automatically connects. I can come in here and add another one. Maybe I want to take off carpet, do an area. I'm going to go from point to point to point. I can also come in here and I can notate. I really want to add a note here, maybe describing something. And as I do that, just puts it out there wherever I pointed to it. I can put my own dimensions. Maybe I want to get a dimension from here to here for some reason. So all I'm doing is marking up the drawings. And so as you look at this, and as I've dropped in these conditions, you'll notice that it just has defaulted everything to blue. But this is where we start adding a little more kind of smarts to it, where I can come in here and say, well, really, if I double click on that condition, it brings up those properties. Maybe I want to make that yellow. You know, notice those are all yellow. Come into the wall types, and maybe I want to make those brown. Or, you know, I want to come back here and maybe make that a little bit brighter. So now I can color code things, make things look a little bit cleaner. Things come out at me. And so as I do that, the whole concept with this is I'm marking things up, dimensioning, notating. You know, I can even come over here and I can highlight something. Hey, I want this to come out at me. So again, just marking things up for my benefit. I have a lot of customers that take this concept and they'll start doing all this, and now they'll say, well, really, what else can we do with this? Well, at any time I can go file print preview and say, this is what's physically showing on the sheet, or maybe I just want to go here to current page. And so now you're talking about printing this out, maybe saving it as a PDF, maybe submitting this to hopefully get a project. I have people use this for part of their presentation. I have people that also utilize this where they send it downstream to the people out in the field. Could be a project manager looking at this, could be a superintendent. So the communication of this is really, really huge. You know, and also keep in mind the stuff I'm showing you, the color coding, eventually the overlays and all this other stuff, that's the full version. But I can send this downstream, and the OST has a view mode only, or a viewer, and the viewer is free. So I always tell people when I'm implementing this application, anybody you think could touch the drawings, at least load the viewer up, and then you can see what everybody's put together and really use this as a great communication tool. So, you know, as we work with this, these are really kind of the basics of starting this. Now, as we keep kind of adding more functionality to this, I can come in here to door type, not only just change the color, right, but I can start adding, you know, organizing my conditions. We got the ability to to be able to turn on kind of like a concept of CAD layer or a takeoff layer, turn things on and off. And those don't have to be based on the same description. So for example, if I go to type here, I really want to put that under maybe a doors category. And you can build your own here. Select it. And if I do that, you'll notice, and maybe I want to also select and put that under a layer called doors. If I come here to walls, same concept. And again, you can organize this however you want. But if you look here, what this is allowing me to do is organize my takeoff. And it really does two things here. And again, these don't have to match. And I'll give you a couple examples here in a minute. But all I'm doing is I'm organizing all this information that I'm taking off. So when I come in here, maybe I want to, like in this case here, I'm going to choose just carpet. Well, the reason I'm saying these are different here, and I'll walk you through this. So now I can organize my takeoff by maybe putting all the doors together, all the flooring that I'm doing. Maybe there's VCT, ceramic tile, and all that. So as I'm working with this, I've got the ability to put this together in a way that makes sense for me to work with this and communicate and understand where everything's at. And I can collapse things up. Maybe I only want to work with the doors. So it's a great way of kind of building a book with chapters concept. And so the other thing that I was showing here a moment ago was not only defining a type, and the type organizes your takeoff conditions, but the layer allows you to turn things on and off. So for example, these other two here, doors and walls, all kind of organized by the same as the way my type was. Floor, there was, in this case, there was a door. If you look here, I did a door type, and the layer was doors and frames. And so it kind of is a one-to-one. The reason I'm saying it doesn't have to be the same is you might have a case here where under the flooring category, you've got VCT, and in other, maybe I want to add another one here, and I want to call this floors, put it under that category. And now I want to put this under, maybe I'm just going to call it ceramic tile. And as I do that, you'll notice that this will go under that category called floors. But I gave it a layer called ceramic tile. So if I come in here and do a takeoff on ceramic tile, it goes under that category, but I gave it a different layer. And the whole concept of the layering is as you start marking up the drawings, things start, getting a little busy. I've got a door count that's overlaid from a carpet takeoff that I've done. And so what the layering does for you is it allows you to come in here and be able to click on this command called layers and be able to come in and turn things on or off and control what I'm physically doing. And again, whatever's turned off, whatever's turned on, you can physically print. I have people that I work with that organize their layers by what the trade's going to do for them. And so they'll take off all that stuff and then communicate to them, this is what I want you to focus on the carpet side. This is what or maybe you're a flooring contractor. This is what I want you to do on the doors, windows, and hardware. So it's another way of communicating really to their subcontractors, being able to use the view mode that's free for the subcontractors. So at any rate, that's the concept of the layers and types. Types organize your takeoff, layers allow you to turn things on and off. So as I work with this, there's a couple other things too that are as I work with this. As I mentioned here was a door type. Maybe I come back here to this wall type, and I want to let's see, here's a good example. Maybe I want to take off this wall, come all the way down. You can also do what they call an attachment. So maybe I want to call this door type 2. And as I do the attachment, I've got the ability to say, hey, the height of this is going to be, this is going to be an 8 by 3.0, and I'm going to make this we'll call this a right-hand door. And as I hit OK, And depending on what I have in this wall type, if my height here is, let's say that's a 9-foot wall, I can come right in here under this door type 2, which, by the way, I wanted to put it under here too. And notice in this case, it's a different legend. But if I come in here and say, click on that, so what that does is really two things. Right now I've shown a count, a length in an area, and then the fourth thing is an attachment. The cool thing about an attachment is that, let's say you've taken off a wall and, from a speed standpoint, you just want to take off all the walls, come all the way through the doors, and if you've gone in here and you've added some attribute information, how high the wall is, what's the thickness, that sort of thing, what that's going to give you now is this wall has some smarts to it in ability. Now at this point, when I come in and use the attachment feature, I can drop in, have it look like a right-hand swing, which is what I did. But so not only did it count that, but it also pulled out the total linear footage of that wall. The other thing that you also have to understand too is that in everything I'm doing is kind of leading up to that phase 2 advanced topics. But we started out just by simply adding a takeoff and doing some things real easily after we've set the scale. Now we've added the attachment. Well, the other thing too is that every time you go in here to one of these conditions, not only can you give it a height and a thickness or whatever, you also can read up to 3 quantities at one given time. So if, let's say, on this length, I wanted to get, surface area both sides, surface area single side, I hit OK, you can actually read up to, or if I come into ceramic tile, I want to get maybe the perimeter, and maybe I want to get an average tile count, whatever. I mean, so it can, every time I do a takeoff, it can read up to 3 different quantities off of, well, 2 other quantities off of the driver. In this case, 67 linear feet. Here's my total square footage. But if I was to come back here and I can say, well, I really want it on both sides, you'll see that that'll double. But as I use the attachment feature different from the count, as I drop that in, it'll instantly pull out the supporting square footage of that 3080 door. So at any rate, this is kind of the basics of working with the application. So the whole concept with this is simply marking things up, building my list of takeoff over here, and kind of rolling with using it kind of from a basic standpoint. As we kind of move into the next kind of phase of things, what I would call more advanced topics, and they're not necessarily hard to turn on, it's just another kind of typically the next step that makes sense. As I'm working with this information, I also have the ability to do what they call a hot link. And so, for example, if I'm over here looking in the toilet room here, and I see something, maybe there's a detail sheet here that's A3, A10 here in the restroom. If I was to come down here, go down to A3, detail 3, I've got the ability to come in here and basically think of it almost like a camera. Take a snapshot. They call it a name view. And the whole concept with this is we talk about supporting multiple monitors is information kind of at your fingertips. I can just simply come in here and highlight that and call this, this is a threshold, detail 3. And as I build those views, I've got the ability now to take those name views and do what they call a hot link. So if I'm back on that sheet here, the first floor, and I look at this, I've got the ability to do this thing called a hot link, which I might want to come in here and say, well, I want to just put the link right there. And then you have a library of views that you've built. And when I do that, now what happens is the link gets in you. I've had people put a link, kind of a legend over here on the left-hand side that they can just click on. Other people hover it right next to the detail. But if I click on that, then that'll reference that detail. And I've had people, well, instead of linking a specific detail, they might have a link that links the detailed sheet. because I can still look at other details here. This just takes me right to that one, the way I've set it up. I can also still open up and go to other sheets within the set of blueprints. So it just becomes a real handy way of being able to review that. And notice it's its own separate screen, so if you have multiple monitors, I can put that over here on the left or right and be able to see my details as I'm working with my takeoff. So again, I call it an advanced feature. It really isn't hard to turn on. It's the function of just naming some sheets and defining where you want the links. The next segment or phase of this is, if you think about when you're doing this takeoff and you're building this list of conditions, and if you're doing similar type of work, instead of, as you drop in the set of plans and having to rebuild this every time, if you notice, I've clicked on these conditions a fair amount just to show you kind of what's in it. But if you notice, instead of just typing in wall type 1, I can give it a type, a layer, I can give it a color scheme, I can go with a, different, I want to make this transparent or solid. Counts have different shapes. If you use attachments, there's a right-hand swing, left-hand swing type of concept. You've got up to 3 quantities. So you spend a fair amount of time with this. And so if it's something that you think you may do again, this is where one of the things that I mentioned earlier about OST being a database-driven application. So the advantage that gives you is that I got the ability just to go in here and I can highlight this information that I've done, and I can just save that back to the database so that now when I have a new project, that information is there. And just to show you a concept, I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to show you kind of what's already put together. If you see the drop-down, we've been focusing mainly on this whole length, area, count, and attachment. But down below here is a list of, or a library of conditions that I can reuse. I didn't have to type those in. Those are already part of the database that I've saved in, based on an earlier project, or gone into the master database here and added them on, within the database structure. So if I come in here at this point and say, well, I really want to do this 3, when I choose this, you'll notice everything that I want about this is already set up. So when I hit OK, it throws it to the right category, and now I'm just pulling it from a library. So if I come in here and I want to do that takeoff, it's the same thing I've been showing you. The only difference is now all of it's set up and I can reuse it. The beauty is, I talk about centralizing this database, and if this database is centralized back on the server, everybody's privy to working with that list of conditions, so people aren't having to rebuild this information. The other thing that as you build the library, and it's just under master style library, as you build your library of conditions that everybody can share and utilize, we just kind of keep adding more capability. The other thing that it also allows you to do is maybe you have a couple different divisions or project types. Maybe you've got a tenant fit out versus a shell and core job. Maybe you have a commercial project versus a multifamily or residential, small projects, large projects type of concept. And so instead of going in here and manually typing this in, or going here and pick your standard list of 15 or 20 conditions, as you build those library of conditions that you can reuse again, it's called a style set. And what it allows you to do, if I could just right mouse key here and say insert style set, you can have a library of these templates. Now, and let your imagination run with this. I've had people say, hey, we're going to we do concrete and framing. I want to pull in the concrete template or the framing template. People that, like I said, tenant improvement versus, a shell and core project. So you can use those for lots of things, but what's nice about this now is instead of having to rebuild that lower left sheet, I just hit select, and everything at this point comes in, and if I expand all the types, I didn't have to go through and manually type all that in, put the type and layer and the different counts and the color coding scheme. All that comes in, and I could still change it for that project, but I have a wonderful starting point. So that's what they call a style set, and it's predicated or built off of the style library. So, as we roll through, the other thing too that you also want to understand is that maybe if I do the drop down here, I may have multiple sheets where I've done takeoff. Anytime I've done any kind of takeoff on this, you'll notice that this is in turquoise or a kind of a green color. Well, it tells me I've done takeoff there. What's really nice about this too is that I'm on this sheet. I've dropped in all these conditions or built these manually, whatever. However I got here, this list of conditions right now is really focusing on the quantities at hand of what I've done here just on this sheet. But if you notice, if I go to the next sheet, all those go to 0 because I haven't done any takeoff on them, but I don't have to rebuild that, from sheet to sheet to sheet. And as I roll through here, one sheet at a time, whatever I take off, all these are 0, but if I come in here and do some kind of quantity takeoff, then that gets added to that door type or whatever that I'm doing. So as I build this up for this project and I click on takeoff or worksheet, everything summarizes into one set of quantities. So it's really nice from a standpoint, I would say, from a production mode, where, hey, I'm dropping in some conditions. I want to do a takeoff on this sheet, do a takeoff on that sheet, and it just automatically rolls into one set of totals, and instead of having to rebuild that and also having it be disconnected. So that's a real advantage of this. And again, it's the database, centralizing this back here when I showed file open database. This whole thing here is, if this is centralized, I get a chance to see the projects, the conditions, the images, all that information, providing everything's on the server, I can view and work with and interact. I've got some customers of mine that have lots of uses, and the chief estimator can sit there at the comfort of his chair and see what people are working on. So the other thing too, I was talking a little bit about, utilizing this from a standpoint of communication. So I was back here on this sheet, and a couple things. One, whatever I take off, whatever, if I'm zoomed in at this point, I can go file, print, preview, and off I roll. But if you've done a fair amount of takeoff on these sheets, instead of going to all the different sheets and doing a file, print, preview, there's a command here called send complete package by email. And what's nice about this is we talk about communicating to an owner. Maybe you want to send this out to someone in the field, have them, show them what you've done. If I go by email here, it'll say, do you want to do all pages or just with takeoff, which would just be the stuff in green? And it zips it up as a file, creates an email in Outlook, and you can send it on its way. There's part of that email that says, hey, if you don't own the full-blown program, you can click on the viewer, and at that point, you can download the viewer and see everything that someone's worked on. So, you're talking about obviously saving on reproducing, having blueprints. You're also saving, the communication is huge on this too. So, at any rate, the other thing that this does too, above and beyond just doing quantity takeoff and communicating what you've done here, it also has an overlay capability. And the overlay allows you to put one set of drawings on top of the other and physically show you what's changed. So if you notice here, blue it was existing, red is something's changed. And if you notice here, the idea is to really flesh out those clouds. So if I took a previous set of drawings and overlaid that on a revised set, this instantly gives you the red, blue, and gray remains unchanged. And the nice thing about this is I talk about communication about as much as I talk about takeoff, because if it's used and implemented correctly, this can really do a lot of things for you. I've had customers use this obviously as a tool to flesh out where the clouds should be and they're not. And I've had customers do that same concept, but instead of looking for change orders, just communicate to the owner, here's what we've done for you over the course of the project, and almost as a way of kind of a customer service concept. And like I said, others use it just to flesh out change and say the cost is going to be X. But it's also, this communication concept. Hey, whatever I'm zoomed in on, I can go edit, copy, current view. And as I do that, I can just go right into Word and just go paste. to support an RFI or a change document. So there's lots of things I can do with it since it's a 2D documentation, a PDF, and, as opposed to just a set of blueprints. Kind of the final piece of this is if I come back in here to a project I've already done, just to kind of segue into kind of our next kind of lesson or session, talking about SAGE estimating, is that, you know, I've got a project here where I've done a quantity takeoff, and you know, again, this application is designed to get all your quantities, organize that information, communicate, and everything we've been talking about. But at that point, you know, on-screen takeoff kind of reaches a dead end there. So what's happened is that Sage Timberline has developed a product called the OST integrator that allows, you know, the Timberline database to be able to kind of live outside the walls of the core application and be able to connect that database to these conditions. So when you step back and you think, well, gee, if I could build a library of these conditions that I could reuse over and over again, centralize those, be able to have everybody work together on that, and those conditions also can live and drive the Timberline database. So the whole concept with this is that the integrator allows us to marry these conditions, you know, and as I'm dropping them in from the database, whether I'm using it this way, whether I'm using it from a style set, you know, and dropping in a bunch of conditions, the integrator allows me to take, and here's my list of projects that are back here in bids, and I just go right mouse key and say take off to new estimate, and I might go in here and say this is the OST webinar, hit OK, and now it's connected to all my Sage Timberline assemblies, and when I hit OK, now it drives the Timberline estimate right down to every assembly and all the items. So now I have an application that can spit out field reports, bill of material information, you know, integrate to accounting, all those kind of things that, you know, I can do here in this dynamic spreadsheet. But what I did is I let OST help me with that process as opposed to rebuilding that from scratch or manually. So, you know, I've gone about 40 minutes here with this presentation. I've kind of hit some of the basic and advanced features, integration with OST. You know, what I'd like you to do is, there is all my contact information, my email address. I know we're going to reach out to you and